Okay, so my biggest takeaway from history of China this semester would be the two Lotus Blossoms and the role of intellectuals and artists over time, including philosophers, poets, calligraphers, and musicians. And first, I would like to talk about the Lotus Blossoms. And the Lotus Blossoms is actually a metaphor because you know how a lotus blossom is actually a beautiful flower that grows from the mud. And it's a metaphor because the mud is actually the corruption and chaos in China, and the blossom is the thing that comes out of the chaos, is the thing that sprouts out of the corruption and brings China back in order, and it makes it beautiful all over again. And there were two throughout the history of China. There were two blossoms. The first one was during the Warring States period, and the second one was during the period of disunity. And for the Warring States period, philosophy, which is Taoism and Confucianism, rose from the conflict and corruption. And philosophy was a very, very big thing back then. It was a huge thing. It had a huge influence on many people, and people practiced it a lot back then by showing respect and virtue and following their rules. For example, back then you would have to respect your parents and elders, filial piety. Yeah, that's what it's called. And you also had to be a gentleman. And to do that, you have to also bow to show respect and virtue. But if you looked at it in the present today, there are some children who talk back to their parents, and some of them don't show as much respect as they used to. And over time, like today in the present, not as many people practice this amazing philosophy. And this could be, and the reason for that could partly be because most of the population is following other religions, and most of the population is Catholic and follows Jesus. But the point is that the philosophers Confucius, Zhuangzi, and Lao Tzu, they were valued a lot back then, and now in the present they are not valued as much. So that was the first blossom, and that is how it changed over time. And the second blossom occurred during the period of disunity, and the blossom that rose out of the conflict this time was art and calligraphy and poetry. And these things had a very big impact on China during the period of disunity because art and calligraphy and poetry was valued a lot back then, and it was viewed as a very, very beautiful thing. And not only was it a beautiful thing for women, but also men valued it a lot. And today in the present, art and poetry would be viewed as a more feminine thing. For example, if you went to an art class today in the school, you would mostly find females there rather than males, because males today, they don't value it as much as they did back then, and that's something that has changed quite a lot. I mean, personally, I think it's a really beautiful thing. I think that I think that men can value it as well, but apparently most of the boys in the present today don't, which I find a bit sad. And also, in fact, it had such a huge impact back then in ancient China that it influenced Taoists and Confucians, basically the sages of the philosophies. And during the period of disunity, there were these sages who wanted to avoid corruption, so they moved away from the government where the corruption was, and they moved to the suburbs, away from the city, because that's where there was conflict. And these sages would do these sages would do whatever they wanted, such as playing the guitar, sitting in awkward positions, and they even wore flowers on their heads. Um, and yes, it may be viewed as a feminine thing in the present, but back then, no, not as much. It was a beautiful thing, and these kinds of sages would be known as hippies. Yes, hippies. And some of these hippies would become musicians and poets and calligraphers, and these hippies valued art a lot, and these hippies enjoyed life so much that other people wanted to be like them and be with them. And some people wanted to be with the hippies so bad that they would want to put pictures of them near their tomb so that in the afterlife they could be just like them and like hang out with them and just have fun. And yeah, I find that very, very interesting because at first there was nothing but chaos and conflict, and all of a sudden these people they move away from it. They move away from the conflict, and they just make art and calligraphy and very beautiful music, and they make life very happy again. They can be. I just find it amazing how they can be so happy during a corrupted period like this. And yeah, that's what I find quite interesting about Lotus Blossoms as well. It's something very beautiful that comes out of corruption. And yeah, I just find it very amazing. So the bottom line is that the first blossom that sprouted out from the Warring States period was philosophy. The second blossom that sprouted out from the period of disunity was art and calligraphy. Both of these had a huge, huge influence back then. But sadly, it is not seen as a very important thing in the present. Yeah, hopefully, even though music and philosophy may be messed up today and not as valued as much, another blossom might sprout from today's corruption sometime in the future. Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe Confucianism and poetry will be brought up again, and it's quite hard to say because it's too soon to tell. But yeah, hopefully something beautiful can come out from today, and yeah. Hopefully something good can come out from the corruption today. Maybe not corruption, but hopefully another Lotus Blossom will sprout. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for listening.